So Instant Replay is a simple card shot sequence where one card jumps out of the deck into your right hand and then instantly actually jumps back to the deck and then back into your right hand. So that's the card shot sequence as a whole, and it happens all in a quick succession. Also, I just want to give a quick thank you to Paul Harris for allowing me to teach this move because you can see like the email exchange or part of it on screen right now, and you'll see that he has been very supportive and very, just very helpful throughout my endeavor. And yeah, he's allowing me to teach the basic move for Instant Replay, as well as an unpublished variation of Instant Replay, and all of my ideas revolving around Instant Replay as well. So huge thank you to Paul Harris for allowing me to teach this move, and yeah, please just buy all of the Paul Harris stuff because Instant Replay is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Paul Harris's creativity, and yeah, you should definitely support Paul Harris. So what most people don't know about Instant Replay is that Instant Replay really isn't the name of a single move. Instant Replay is actually the name for a card shot sequence as a whole. The sequence is a card shoots out from the deck, your right hand catches it, you then display it, and then you want to ask, here comes an Instant Replay. And then instantly the card shoots back onto the deck and shoots back into your right hand, sort of like a magnet, alright? So that's generally what Instant Replay is, but Paul Harris never really names the card shots, so it's just really part one. So part one is where the card jumps out from the deck into your right hand, and then part two, where your right hand shoots the card back into the deck. So that's part one and part two, and I assume it's this lack of a name that caused like just this one flourish to be known as Instant Replay, even though it's not just this one flourish, it's actually the sequence as a whole. But Paul Harris actually names 3 different people who have inspired this sequence. The first one is actually Eddie Fetcher. Eddie Fetcher actually published something known as the Spring Card Revelation. He published that in a book called Magician Nightly by Eddie Fetcher, written by Jerry Mentzer back in 1974. So that is a pretty cool one-handed card revelation. The second person who inspired this sequence was Daryl Martinez. So Daryl, you probably already know, he published something by the name of the Hot Shot Cut. It's this very popular move where you cut the deck and one card flies from out of the deck into your right hand, and just so happens to be the selection. There we go. So that was published in For Your Entertainment Pleasure by Daryl, written by Stephen Minch back in 1982. The last person to inspire the sequence was someone by the name of Magic Juan. I don't know who really Magic Juan is. The only name that really pops up when I search Magic Juan is the musician. I didn't even know who he was until I searched it up, but that's someone, I guess. But I'm going to assume that he meant Juan Tamariz. So I'm not entirely sure what move or what sequence Juan Tamariz actually published to inspire Paul Harris, but I still found it worthwhile to put Juan Tamariz over there since it is mentioned in an official publication by Paul Harris. And finally, Instant Replay itself. Instant Replay itself was published in a Paul Harris book called A Close-Up Kind of Guy back in 1983. Sometimes you can see it in my bookshelf. It's that's a second printing. So that's all the history behind Instant Replay, as well as the inspirations behind Instant Replay. Now, generally, if you're going to learn Instant Replay or just any pressure-based move, you can use any deck, but I also highly recommend you to use a stiffer deck. So in this case, I'm using a Fournier, which has a nice varnish, but if you don't have Fourniers, you can use like a new USB-CC deck, or you can use any Taiwan deck as well, since those are very stiff as well. So having a stiffer deck means that it'll be a lot easier to feel the pressure applied on the card. If you have something that's way too soft, it'll be kind of hard to feel like the amount of pressure that you're putting on a card. And the second reason why is that the snap of the cards will make moves easier. So you want a snappier, stiffer deck, so then you have an easier learning experience. But if you're more experienced with card shots or card springs or any pressure-based moves, you can use any deck that you want. But if you're just a beginner, I recommend you to have any stiffer deck. Now let's get into part 1 of Instant Replay. So this is the one that the card shoots out from the deck onto your right hand. That was not a good one. There we go. So you're just going to upjog the top card slightly. You can have your right hand come over and just push this top card forward, or you can just use the pad of your left thumb to contact the center of the card and just push it forward. You'll need about I would say 3-5 centimeters. It doesn't really matter, but generally just need a pretty small gap up or small portion of the deck to be upjogged, like so. Alright? So your left thumb and your middle finger are going to grip the long edge of the deck, right? You'll notice that I'm actually gripping with the fingertips. I don't want it to be wrapped around of the deck. I want only the fingertips to be contacting this card, right? So you'll notice that these two fingers are gripping about 1/8 of the card, right? That's why I say 3 centimeters or 5 centimeters. That's going to be enough because these fingers are gripping 1/8. All right. With the upjog and with these fingers in place, your left index is going to come from underneath of the card, and then it's just going to push upwards. So it's just going to apply a bit of pressure, and this causes this card to buckle upwards in an upside down U shape. Right? So this builds up pressure as a whole. And to release this pressure, which causes this card to shoot out, all I'm going to need to do now is that I'm going to continue pushing upwards, continuously building up the pressure, and to finally shoot at this card, I'm going to release pressure with my thumb. Alright, so I'm just going to relax my thumb and let this card slide out from under the thumb. And what this does is that this causes this card to actually revolve around the middle finger, and it's going to rotate 180 degrees. So if it's face down, it's going to rotate face up into my right hand, just like so. Alright? So just as another brief little tip, your index continuously pushes up on it, alright? It doesn't just stop. So one mistake that I did when I was first learning part 1 was that I just applied pressure and then just tried releasing pressure, and this caused the card to just not really fly that far. What you want is that you want this index finger to continuously push up on this card, and it continuously pushes up until the very last moment to flick this card into your right hand. And that's how you'll cause this very, very nice and distanced card shot. Alright? Because if you don't continuously push upwards on your index finger, it just flops open, and that's not very nice. You want your index finger to be continuously pushing up to really launch this card to have a very nice amount of distance. Right? So here are just a couple of tips regarding part 1 of instant replay. So you want the deck to be angled towards your right hand. So you'll notice that it's about a 30 degrees off to the ground, right? It's not completely parallel with the floor. And the reason why is that if you actually try and do instant replay part 1 with your hand parallel with the floor, it just sort of shoots it on top of the deck, which is not really something that you want, unless I'll get into that a bit later on. Alright, so you want your hand to be angled towards your right hand, and this causes the card to fly towards your right hand. Alright, so this goes towards where you want it to shoot. If you want to shoot forwards, just angle it towards the front, and it'll shoot forwards as well. Alright, so this goes towards where you want it to go. The second tip is that you'll want to play around with the distance between your left and right hand, right? Because the third tip is that you don't want any of your hands to move. You want your hands to be anchored in place. Generally, my right hand and my left hand is about 15 centimeters apart, and my right hand is slightly sort of behind my left hand. So this is the sort of distance that you'll see me do instant replay from. So you want to play around with this distance because you don't want either hands to move. Because what Paul Harris really reinforces is that you should have this card fly into your right hand without moving either of your hands, sort of like a magnet. So you want to make it seem like this card just flies into your right hand, like it's attracted to it, like it just sort of wants to go there, right? But if you're just starting out and you're just trying to gauge the distance, it's fine if you're trying to move your right hand around, because you know you're just playing around with distance. You're just trying to see what the proper distance between both hands are. So in performance, it shouldn't move, but if you're just practicing, you can move your right hand around, right? So those are the 3 tips. Angle the deck towards your right hand. 2 is that play around with the distance until you find a comfortable distance between both hands. And then 3, don't move either hands if you're in performance, but if you're just practicing, feel free to move your right hand around to catch this card, right? So I'll just briefly touch on Eddie Fetcher's card spring revelation, since that'll be relevant later on. So hold the deck in a dealer's grip. Now you're going to move your left thumb until the side of the pad of the thumb is just contacting the left long edge of the card. So it'll be contacting around the white border of the card, I would say. Right, so it's contacting around here. Next, my left thumb, just from pure friction, if I just move my left thumb to the right, this causes this card to actually buckle. Alright, so this causes this card to lift up, and because my middle finger is there, it just stops it from moving elsewhere, right? Because if my middle finger was not there, it'll just push off. So I want my middle finger to be there, and this causes this card to buckle. Next, you can then slip your index finger in between of the space between the buckle card and the rest of the deck. And now notice that this is basically the prime position for an instant replay part 1. So you're in the perfect position for instant replay part 1. Alright, so that is the setup for the spring card revelation if you adjust it for instant replay part 1. So you just you do the buckle and you just tilt your hand. There, it allows you to do instant replay part 1. So what Eddie Fetcher did for his spring card revelation was that rather than angle his hand towards his right hand, which caused this card shot, what he did was that he actually let the deck remain parallel with the floor. So the moment that he did his setup and then prepare for the card shot, notice what happens. It actually just jumps upwards. So if you did it with a bit more force, it just turns face up on top of the deck. And that's exactly what he did. This is what is called spring card revelation, right? It just flicks up on top of the deck, like so. All right, so that is what Eddie Fetcher's original spring card revelation was. The only difference between spring card revelation and this modified version of instant replay part 1 is the angle of the hand. If it is parallel with the floor, you'll get the spring card revelation, but if it is angled towards your right hand, you'll get instant replay part 1 with a buckling action rather than up jogging action. So that's the main difference between the 2 moves. So for instant replay part 2, you're just done with instant replay part 1, so you have a card in your right hand. You're just going to grip the card by the long edges near the center of the card with your middle finger and your thumb over here. Your index finger is actually curled behind of the card, sort of beneath the center line. So you have the center line over here. Your index finger would be sort of beneath it, all right? So it's sort of like this, all right? Next, it's going to be pretty much identical to part 1. So you're just going to apply a bit of pressure with your index finger, causing this card to buckle sort of upwards, all right? So it's sort of buckling upwards, like so. And now you're going to tilt your right hand towards the deck, and you're just going to repeat the same mechanics as part 1. Push on the card with your index finger as you release pressure with your thumb, causing this card to revolve around of your middle finger, doing a 180, and then as it lands on the deck, it's going to do another 180. So in general, the card does a 360. All right. So that is Instant Replay Part 2. Now, a mistake that people do with Instant Replay Part 2 is that they actually hold the card above of the deck. And that's not bad, but it's also not correct either. When Paul Harris published Part 2 of Instant Replay, he actually makes it a point where both hands are actually on the same sort of plane, right? Not one hand is above the other. They're both on the same level. So when you do Instant Replay Part 2, you're going to angle this card towards the deck and just let it shoot on the deck, all right? So it's going to be the exact same thing, but you see people do it from up above, but that's not right. It's actually side by side, like so. So you'll need to play around with the angle. If you do it like parallel with the floor, it still sort of works, but generally you want it sort of angled towards the deck, like so. All right, so that is Instant Replay Part 1, and a tip as well. Now here comes the instant replay sequence. You're going to execute part 1, so you're going to updraw this card, and you're going to have instant replay part 1. So you're going to have the card in your right hand, just like so. Now you're going to regroup the card in preparation for part 2. All right, so you can take your time. So after this first part, you can then just relax and just play around with it, let the audience absorb what they just saw and be like, okay, and now time for an instant replay. So that's what Paul Harris actually says. He says, quote, and now for an instant replay, end quote. So you're going to now, after you're done absorbing what they just saw, you're going to execute part 2, but you're going to modify it a bit. So rather than doing it normally, where this card would just land on top of the deck, you're actually just going to move your right hand forward, just a touch. So when you do instant replay part 2, this card actually lands upjogged on top of the deck. So the card is now upjogged on top of the deck, which means that the moment that it lands, you can now do part 1 once more. And that is the whole instant replay sequence. The whole instant replay sequence is part 1, yeah, take a look at this card that I just produced. And then now for an instant replay, you execute part 2, and then the moment that you do, execute part 1 once more. So it's supposed to be a very quick boop. Oh yeah, take a look at this card. And then, oh, I want to see it again. Boop, boop. So that is generally how instant replay works. So, and that's why it's called instant replay, is that you do it once and it's like, oh, you want to see it again? Yeah, sure. Here it is again. So that is why it's called instant replay, and that's how the sequence of instant replay works. So this is a fun but knackier version of instant replay. So you're going to have 2 cards on top of the deck. I'm going to have my ace of clubs and my ace of spades. And 1 card is in my right hand and 1 card is on my deck hand. And this is just, yeah, they're both in preparation for instant replay parts. So this is part 1 and this is part 2. All right, and this is where the knacky part comes into play, because you're going to execute both parts at the exact same time. So they're going to be prepared, and now you're just going to execute both parts at the exact same time, right? I'm in position, and then I execute both parts at the exact same time. And then I have to move both hands to sort of catch it. Yeah, there's not really much explanation for it. You just sort of have to practice it. Like, as much as I want to give tips on it, it's kind of hard, because you just have to sort of get used to what's happening. All right, so that's simple switch. All right, so generally, here are just a couple of tips besides, oh yeah, just do both moves at the same time. So if both cards are actually colliding mid-air, what you can do is that you can actually shift your right hand slightly upwards, so then this card actually goes on top of this card, right? Because you'll notice that this card shoots slightly above of your right hand, like so. All right. The second thing is that both cards are supposed to rotate 360 degrees. Now, if you've been paying attention, the card shot at part 1 only rotates 180 degrees. So this card is supposed to rotate an extra 180 degrees to complete a 360. But how does that work? Well, the reason is that as you shoot your top card, and as this card is going at the exact same time, your right hand is not in perfect position to catch this card. So what happens is that as the cards are going and this card completes its 360, your right hand is going to have to drop down to catch this card in time. But because you have to drop this right hand down, this gives it enough time for this card to rotate an extra 180 and land face down on your right hand, like so. Alright, so just this act of dropping down lets this card rotate an extra 180. Alright, so that's just a second thing regarding the simple switch. Another thing that Paul Harris actually says is that because this card, because you really only need to move this hand up and down to catch this, to catch part 1, you really only need to focus on your deckhand. So you only need to focus on catching this one card. So because you only need to move this one hand up and down, all you need to do is just focus on catching this hand. So all your attention should be on this hand over here and focus on catching part 2 while your right hand just drops down. So that's just 3 tips to make this move a bit easier and also look a bit nicer. So let's get into FourPlay. So this is something unpublished that Paul Harris has given me permission to share. And it's called FourPlay, and it's a 4-card 1x1 card production. So what's happening is that, so you have all the cards that you want to produce on top of the deck. And now, rather than having your right hand palm up like with the previous handlings, you want your palm to actually be turned towards the deck and fingers pointed towards the deck, just like so. All right. So now you're going to execute part 1 of instant replay. So you're going to execute part 1, which produces the first card, but now you're going to clip it in between of your index and your thumb, like so. All right, so that's the first production. The next thing you're going to do is that you're just going to repeat instant replay part 1 again, but this time the second card is going to be clipped in between of your index and your middle finger, and then you're just going to repeat. You're just going to execute part 1 once more, and you're going to clip it in between of your middle finger and your ring finger, like so. And then the last card, you're just going to clip it in between of your pinky and your ring finger, just like so. And that is FourPlay. You're just doing part 1 very, very fast and in quick succession and catching it with your right hand, right? So while this doesn't look hard, it actually is pretty hard because you want to do everything in quick succession. All right, so you want to do 4 instant replay part 1s fast in a row and catch all of them in between your fingers without failing. All right, so that is FourPlay. It's a 4-card 1x1 production that you just sort of do like so, right? And the reason why I actually taught the spring card revelation was because I actually found it to be a lot more efficient than upjogging each individual card. Because if you actually upjog each individual card, that actually takes a while to upjog each card and then catch them afterwards, right? So the reason why I taught spring card revelation was that it was actually a lot easier to just buckle the card and then just shoot, because if I just buckle and then shoot, buckle, shoot, buckle, shoot, it's going to be a lot faster than physically upjogging, right? So that's why I taught the spring card revelation. I found that buckling this card, shooting it, was just faster than upjogging and then doing that. But if you find upjogging to be a lot more efficient, then go ahead and do that. But I personally find buckling the cards and then shooting it to be faster for FourPlay, right? So that is FourPlay, right? You just do that in quick succession. right? Now, a personal preference regarding FourPlay is that once you execute FourPlay, one problem that I have regarding FourPlay is that once you produce all the cards, it's kind of hard to see each individual card because you have this top card sort of hiding all the bottom cards. So what I personally like to do, right? Paul Harris teaches it to catch like the top card and then go down. I actually like going it from bottom to top. So I like going from pinky to ring, ring finger to middle, middle to index, and then index to thumb, right? So I like building it up rather than building it down, because then people can see the layers of the cards rather than it being hidden underneath of this one top card. All right, so those are that's just a tip regarding FourPlay, and yeah, feel free to use whichever one that you want. But that is FourPlay by Paul Harris, right? So here's just a couple of applications regarding instant replay that are more magic based rather than being like flourishy, right? The first thing that you can do is actually a color change. So if you have a card back to back like so, and you have it in your right hand, just like so, you can then execute part 2, but have your hands closer together so that when you execute part 2, it just flips this card 180 degrees and then lands face up the other way, right? So it's like a nice flourishy color change, just like so, right? So it just rotates and boop, and that's that. The other color change that you can do is also using part 1. So if you have the cards back to back, and you just have the double up jogged, here if you just execute part 1 and catch these 2 cards into a dealer's grip. So if you're afraid of the 2 cards splitting, just instantly grab it in a dealer's grip, right? So this is just part 1 in a nutshell, right? But I won't go too much into it because I know Dominique Zuvivier also has something similar to this, so I'm just briefly going over it. But that's just another idea that you have. The next application you can do for instant replay is you can do it onto the table. So if you have a card copped or card palmed or whatever, you just have a smearing of cards on the table like so, all right? And you load this card with your cop card, and then you just do instant replay onto the table. Because there's this mess on the table, it looks like this card just sort of changes, right? So you have your double facer. Look for a patch where the card is similar enough and execute the change. It sort of looks like this card just changes on top of the table and just dragging one card with it, if that makes sense. All right, so that's just another application for instant replay for a color change done on a table. So yeah, that's just a fun little variation. The next thing you can do is that using part 1, you can do it as a production, obviously, right? So you have a card, and you just execute, so you have the card they want produced on top of the deck, and you execute instant replay part 1. So you display your hand as empty, and just have it be produced, like so. All right? Or you can have multiple cards. So here I have 4 random cards, and I have them up jogging on top of the deck. I can display them. I can display my hand as empty, and then just show these 4 cards. So it's sort of like a top shot, but using part 1 of instant replay. So this next application is a card through box. It's not a very good idea, but it's still a pretty quirky idea that I think will be kind of fun. So you want to have a tuck case that has the same back design as the cards. Preferably you don't have the seal, but I don't like taking off the seal, so yeah, but preferably you shouldn't have the seal. So the reason why it should be the exact same is so that you can have a card on top and it blends in with the tuck case. All right, so right now it seems like there's no card on top of the box, even though there is. All right, so that's why you want to have a tuck case with the same back design, right? So what we're going to do is that you have the deck in the box, and what you're going to do is that you're going to load the card on top of the tuck case, just like so. So now you have just a seemingly empty deck, seemingly normal box, like so, right? The next thing that you're going to do is that you're going to say like, I don't know what you're going to say. Honestly, this is just an idea. But you're going to say like, oh yeah, watch your card actually go through the box. And now what you can do is that you can actually just buckle this card and then execute instant replay part 1. So it looks like this card actually just jumps from out of the tuck case. Actually, I should do it from this side. So then, yeah, so it looks like this card actually just pops from out of the box, and then you could just show the box and show the cards all being still inside the deck, and show that their selection is the only one that's jumped out of the box. So that's just a cute little idea that you can sort of use. I wouldn't use it, but hey, it's just a little idea that you can do for instant replay, because why not? And that was instant replay. That was a pretty long video, but if you're interested in instant replay and some of the other applications that people have put for instant replay or any similar flourishes, you can look at A Close-Up Kind of Guy by Paul Harris, The Art of Astonishment by Paul Harris, Trip Hop by Alec Blanco, that's on Magic Stream by Illusionist, Talk About Tricks by Joshua J, and The Boy Who Cried Magic by Andy Gladwin. So those are all great resources using similar moves to instant replay as well. So this was a lot more flourish focused than I'd like, but you know, a video focused on flourishes isn't like bad once in a while, so I'll take it. And I was able to slip in like a few more magic focused applications here and there, so it's all right. But once again, I'd like to thank Paul Harris for allowing me to teach this move, as well as a large variety of other applications regarding this move. So yeah, be sure to check out his material, because like I said, this move is just the tip of the iceberg for just his like creative mind. Like he has put out some of the most like mind-blowing stuff in Magic in general. So if you think that this is the best of Paul Harris's material, you are so wrong, because I would argue that this is probably the weakest of his material. So yeah, feel free and please do check out Paul Harris's work. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me today. Yeah, stay healthy, stay safe, and see you guys next time for yeah, another thing. Yeah, see you.